Welcome back, everybody. Episode 8 of the Sports Lounge underway, and it's a special Sports Lounge for you as we take a break from the Panthers talk, and we'll turn our attention to the North Carolina Tar Heels. Carolina is struggling on the football side of things as they've just been hit really hard with injuries, dealing with a new quarterback as well in Chaz Surratt, and just having to deal with a lot of adversity as they've played a few tough opponents as well, and it doesn't get any easier for the Tar Heels. But I had the chance to sit down with the play-by-play voice of the Tar Heels, Jones Angell. We talk football, but we also talk basketball. Late Night with Roy coming your way tonight as you're listening to this podcast. So, gosh, basketball season already here. So this is a fun one for me as a huge Carolina fan. This was really interesting and really great to get to talk with Jones Angell. So here it is, episode 8 of the Sports Lounge. Enjoy. Man, really honored to have joined us here on the Sports Lounge. You know him as the play-by-play voice of the Tar Heels, also the co-host of what, in my opinion, is the best podcast out there, the Carolina Insider, Mr. Jones Angell. Jones, how are you? And thanks for taking some time to talk Tar Heels with us.
Oh, man, Pat, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the kind words about the podcast. We have fun with it, man. We try to talk some serious stuff and talk some not so serious stuff and have a good time. And that's been a lot of fun. And obviously love being here in Chapel Hill with the Tar Heels. Wish things were going a little differently right now football-wise. It's been a tough first half of the year for sure for Carolina. But hopefully they're going to get this thing turned around soon.
Yeah, we'll start with football. You know, it's a team that's young, but a team that also has been, decimated by injury, to say the least. New quarterback in Chaz Surratt. They were dealing with a quarterback battle at the beginning of the season. Just kind of take us through what maybe the mood is around not only the locker room, but just around the campus with all the things that have happened this season.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different things. I mean, one, for sure, there's a level of frustration. I mean, I think Carolina feels like, it had this thing moving in the right direction at a pretty high level for the last couple of seasons. But they also understood that this was going to be a transition year, particularly offensively. When you lose what Carolina lost from a year ago, you don't just automatically bounce back from that. And I mean, you're talking about an NFL quarterback, 3 NFL wide receivers, 2 guys at the tailback position who are getting a chance in the NFL level as well. And so, that's a lot of skill to lose. And so they knew that there was going to be a little bit of a transition, again, I think is the best way to put it, on the offensive side. But when you start mixing in all the other stuff that has occurred, that really has made it a frustrating season to this point, because it really has, Pat. And I know some of this kind of sounds like excuses and you start rolling your eyes, but it just feels like the perfect storm of kind of things that have not gone the way the Tar Heels wanted them to go that have led them to this place, and that is the injuries, of course, some lack of success early that maybe brings you down a little bit. You have the young quarterback in Chaz Surratt who now all of a sudden doesn't have the consistent pieces around him, and so I just think it's been a combination of all those type of things. Now, I will also say that I do think that this team has continued to work very hard. They've continued to practice very hard. They've continued to play very hard. If there is any kind of frustration at a deeper level in the locker room, other than just being mad that you're not winning, I have not seen any indication of it, nor have I heard any of any indication of something like that. So I think the attitude has been very positive, but at some point, man, you'd love for them to have that hard work and that positive attitude. You'd love to see that pay off with the positive result one weekend. And so that's what they're working towards, and maybe it's going to happen this Saturday. We'll see.
And what's going through the head of Chaz Surratt right now? I mean, he comes in and, he's new, he's fresh, he's in a quarterback battle. It seems like he's kind of, won the job here for the foreseeable future. And now all of these pieces around him that he thought he was going to have go down, including, just a decimated offensive line. What do you think's going through his head right now?
I would think about a million things, and I think that's part of the problem, right? I mean, I do think when you take over that position as a young player, that's hard enough as it is, because, and in Carolina's system, they put a lot on the quarterback. I mean, a lot is asked of that player at the line of scrimmage and in the opening second or two of a play to read the defense, make your decision, and know where to go with the ball. So there's a lot of processing that has to happen. That has nothing to do with the physical side of it, just the mental side of it, of trying to process the best play, the best option option to use off the particular play call and trust that player to make that decision on a consistent basis. So that's hard enough as it is, particularly as a young guy. But I think also when you do start to lose those consistent pieces around you, that's where, man, I think it just gets so much harder because, and not saying the Tar Heels would be 6-0 right now if they had all their pieces the whole time, because they lost the Cal game. They already showed that this was going to be a little bit of a different type of year. But man, to have a Austin Prohl, or to have a Thomas Jackson, or to have a Carl Tucker in addition to Brandon Fritz at the tight end spot, to have these consistent pieces, guys who have gone out there and done it before, I think would be a huge positive for Chaz Surratt. And you mentioned the offensive line. It's just been, it has been really tough there for a variety of reasons, not just through this season, but in the off season for the Tar Heels, losing guys for various reasons that have really made it hard to find the five best and be able to stick with those five. And so when you start mixing in a little bit of inconsistency up front where you don't have the kind of time on a play-by-play basis that you want, with the fact that now you've lost all your most experienced playmakers, with the fact that you're already a young guy at the quarterback position, I think it makes sense to understand why Chaz Surratt is struggling a little bit, particularly as the Tar Heels start going through conference play here and they're playing teams that know them better and know their tendencies and know what they want to do. That happens every year where you start playing teams that are more familiar with you. So all of those things, I think, right now are adding together to cause some of Chaz Surratt's struggles. Now, I think you can see what's there. You can see the athleticism. You can see that he doesn't necessarily make poor decisions on a consistent basis, although I think that he has made a few more here recently than he did early in the year. So you can see some of the positives there, but I think one concern would be, how do you make sure that you don't have him fall so low confidence-wise or in his ability that it's hard to bring him back up. And I actually talked to Larry Fedora about that earlier this week, and he said, that was something the staff was very conscious of and talking to Chaz about and trying to make sure that he remains confident in his abilities, because I do think that's important, particularly at that position.
And about 10 days or so prior to the season, you and Adam had a chance to sit down with head coach Larry Fedora on your Carolina Insider podcast. And he had mentioned that it was probably the toughest challenge he has had in regards to the offense. And we see coming out this week that he may be calling some more plays on the offense, just taking a hold of that. What do you think's going through his head right now as his squad? He doesn't want to use that as a crutch, with the injuries, but what do you think's going on through his head right now?
Well, you have to imagine you have a guy here in Larry Fedora who has built his entire coaching career on the offensive side of the ball. And that's not to say that he doesn't care about defense, that he doesn't want to be good on that side. That's not what I'm saying. But he moved through the coaching ranks because of what he was able to do offensively. As an assistant, as a coordinator, as a head coach, this is what he really latched onto and he believed in the way that he has chosen to play. And he's had success. I do think that you can see that there's been a proven level of success through his track record on the offensive side. So then all of a sudden, when it's not working, and it's not working at a pretty extreme degree here the last couple of games for the Tar Heels, you can understand where that would be a challenge for him. And so I think what really becomes important now is how does Larry Fedora's offensive staff, how do they stay true to what they believe in and what has made them successful, but how do they do so in a way that this team with this personnel group, how can this group be successful doing that? And so I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure anybody does, but I know Larry Fedora and his staff are working hard to try and figure it out. But they don't want to completely move away from what they believe in or from what has led them to this point in their careers. But they also, I think, realize that you can't do everything that you would normally do. And something that Larry Fedora says all the time is that, when building your game plan, you have to focus on what the lowest common denominator is. So what does Chaz Surratt feel like he can do and can't do? And what's the point of putting anything into the game plan that he doesn't feel comfortable with? Because if he doesn't feel good about it, if he doesn't feel like he can be successful or has struggled with it in practice, what in the world is that going to do for you if you put it in the game plan that week or have it on Saturday? So, I think they're very conscious of that. But then you also have to make sure that you have enough to be diverse in what you're doing with the football when you're out there. So I think you can understand the challenges that they are facing in that regard. And Pat, I'll say this: I thought Carolina's offense, the first couple of games when they were as healthy as they had been all year, they were much better than I thought they would be at the beginning of the season. And so what I think you have seen is a couple different things as the year has gone along. One, the injuries have taken away the playmakers, some of the experienced playmakers, as we just talked about. I think other teams are getting more film on Chaz Surratt, so they know his tendencies, they know his strengths, they know his weaknesses. And again, I'll go back to some of the opponents now are more familiar with what the Tar Heels like to do. And so I think that's why you've seen the regression during this year of the offense to this point compared to the first couple of games where I think they were better than most people thought they would be early this season.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at Cal and Louisville, and the Cardinals come to Keenan, and you got Lamar Jackson on the other side of the ball, but they kind of hung tough with the Cardinals, obviously losing 47-35, but the offense was able to put up the points, and really hard to stop Lamar Jackson at this point in the season. But yeah, I thought they hung tough, in the first part of the season.
Yeah, and that's where you're disappointed that the defense was struggling those first couple of weeks, because I think the defense has been much better since those first two games. Now, some of the stats may not necessarily say that, but I think those two things go hand in hand, that as the offense has struggled more and not been able to stay on the field very much, not been able to put up a ton of points, I think eventually that wears down on your defense as the game moves along. But it really has been, the first couple of games, the Tar Heel defense was struggling, the offense was doing all right, and then there's been this big switch where I think the last handful of games, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Carolina's defense has kept the Tar Heels in the game till about midway third quarter. And then you can almost see just, when something has happened, and in each game it's been a key turnover, I think that's really changed the tide, that you can see the defense kind of get worn down a little bit. And that's not to suggest they're in bad shape or that they're not conditioned. It's to suggest that they've been on the field a darn long time against some good teams, and that eventually that's hard to do. And so, I think those first couple of games, the defense would love to have those back, and here in the last 3 or 4 weeks, man, the offense would love to get a redo. So now the question is, can they get a couple of these together where they're both playing at a decently high level? And they hope to do that certainly in the back half of the season.
Yeah, and you had Notre Dame come into town this past weekend. What was it like around campus just to have that caliber of a program come in? Obviously, the result wasn't what everyone was hoping for, but just to have Notre Dame back in Chapel Hill, what was that like?
It was a terrific weekend from the other than the result part of things, because it was a great energy on campus. Of course, UNC as a university, launched this big capital campaign that they're going through. So there was a lot of just extra things and extra energy around. It's interesting, though. I'm not sure Notre Dame carries the amount of cachet that it used to, especially with maybe younger people. I think probably, I feel about Notre Dame differently than somebody who's in college today. And my parents probably feel differently about Notre Dame than I do, because, the Irish used to be just this lone entity that everybody could see on television, but they were about the only one. And now everybody's on TV all the time. And so I think part of that has taken away a little bit of that Notre Dame luster, and that is not in any way to diminish Notre Dame's program or their team this year or how badly they beat the Tar Heels this Saturday. But I do think it's a little different than it used to be. However, just that name itself, the historical significance of Notre Dame, that always does bring a little extra energy to the matchup. And so I do think Chapel Hill was buzzing a little bit this weekend, and I think you saw the Duke game. The crowd was there, and a big crowd, loud crowd that day in Kenan Stadium, and you hope that those crowds continue to be solid for the Tar Heels. But as they continue to lose games and it continues to be a tough season, naturally you're going to lose a little bit of that energy. And so hopefully Carolina can get this thing turned around and keep things moving in a positive direction.
The Tar Heels at home again this weekend, taking on Virginia, and then a really tough stretch to end the month of October at number 15 Virginia Tech, and then at home against Miami. What are some things you're looking to see from this Carolina team? You hate to already call it a season, but being 1-5, they kind of just got to see what they have offensively and defensively and try to build on it the rest of the year heading into next year. What are you looking for from this team?
They have to find a way to be just consistent offensively. And Pat, even if that's just staying on the field a little bit longer, they just have to sustain some drives. I mean, they went 3 and out the first 3 possessions against Georgia Tech, went 3 and out the first 5 possessions against Notre Dame. They've gone 3 and out in 13 of their 26 possessions in the last 2 games. Then you mix in 6 turnovers and or safeties. That's 19 out of their 26 possessions that they've either gone 3 or out or they've turned it over. That can't happen. And so, I mean, that's almost 3/4 of the time. So they have to be able to sustain some drives, stay on the field a little bit, allow the tempo that they practice so much to be a benefit to them, because you have to get that first down. You have to get that second first down to really let that tempo become a weapon, because if you don't get a first down, the tempo just becomes a real negative factor for you, because you're out on the field for 50 seconds and then you're punting it away again. And so that they have to be able to sustain a little bit offensively and allow their defense a little bit of time on the sideline, get a little bit of confidence moving in the right direction offensively. It would go a long way. It would go a long way for these games to be more competitive. It would go a long way for them to have a chance to win. To me, that's the biggest issue right now.
And we look at the ACC as a whole. You have NC State, who's climbed into the top 25, into the mix. What do you think that does, not only having NC State in there, but teams like Virginia Tech, Miami, Louisville, and of course the reigning national champions, Clemson, there in the top 2. They may be the best team in the country right now. What do you think that does as a whole for the ACC in regards to football?
Well, I think the Atlantic Coast Conference for the last several years now has really made a commitment to football. I think they've been consistently improving up and down the conference, and it helps to have a player or two on that national level. And you've seen that with Clemson and Florida State and Louisville to a little bit of a lesser degree here over the last couple of seasons. And so to have that combination of, you have a couple of teams that right now are elite, that are at the top. You have a pretty deep conference where I do think there are quality teams as you go down, even when you're into team 9, 10, 11 in the league, there's still some good teams there. And so I think that is a benefit, and the commitment that the league has made to it. I mean, there's no doubt the importance of football in the world of college athletics today and moving forward. And so I think ACC understands that, and I think they've done a nice job continuing to honor the tradition of basketball, to understand the excellence that they have achieved as a conference in basketball. I think they're far and away the best basketball conference, but being able to balance that with football, being able to say, hey, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. And I think the ACC is as close to being at the top of both as any conference has been in some time.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't get a chance to talk a little Carolina basketball with you. The full 2017-18 schedule was released just a few weeks ago, and of course, Late Night with Roy will be this Friday as Kenny Smith, the Jet, he'll be the host. But Jones, a couple things that stand out to me. One, the Tar Heels, they have to play 3 ACC games in a span of 5 days, something that hasn't been scheduled in almost 40 years. And then they finish off the season with quite possibly one of the brutal schedules in the country. If you can, just talk about the scheduling a little bit for the Heels.
It's amazing how the Tar Heels seem to find these crazy schedule quirks every single year on the basketball side of things. And I remember thinking last year that the closing stretch for the Tar Heels, the last 6 or 7 games, was about as tough as it could get, and then you saw this year's. It got even tougher. And so, I mean, I'll start there. I mean, those last couple of games, and it doesn't even really matter where you pick it. It can be the Duke game on February 8th. So then the Tar Heels play that game on Thursday the 8th at State on February the 10th, that's Saturday, and then Notre Dame on Monday the 12th. That's that 3 games in 5 days that you were referencing. And then after that, no big deal. Then you've got at Louisville, at Syracuse, Miami, who's going to be good at home, and at Duke to close things out in your last 4 games. That's as difficult a 7-game stretch when you consider the quality of competition, the timing of the games, the rivalry aspects of some of those games as well. It does not get more difficult than that in the world of college basketball. And Carolina's going to lose some of those games. They're not going to be able to go 7-0 because nobody will be able to go 7-0 during that stretch. And so I think what becomes important is that you get some of those wins, you protect your home court. Of course, you want to beat Duke. See if you can steal 1 or 2 on the road and continue to improve. And I think Roy Williams does this as well as any coach in the country. His teams play the best at the end of the year. They always do. And so for him, Carolina laid an egg last year late in the season at Virginia. And it was just kind of one of those games. And so what I think was really impressive about that is that they didn't let that game hang on to them in any way. They didn't let that game affect what they did the next day. All they did was learn from that game and continue to move on. Because I do think in today's ACC, you have to understand, particularly on the road, you're gonna lose 1 or 2. And when you're playing 3 games in 5 days, it's going to be hard to be your best in all 3 of those games. And so you do your best. Of course, you want to win, but I think you also have to understand that sometimes you're going to drop on you. You just need to improve from that. So, I do think at this point in time, if anybody doesn't fully trust Roy Williams and what he's doing as the head coach of the Tar Heels, they're just not paying attention. So he'll have them as ready as they can be. I don't know if this is a national championship caliber team yet, just because we haven't seen them enough. But certainly when you have one of the best players in the country in Joel Berry, one of the best competitors in the country in Joel Berry, in addition to some young talented guys that are out there, you have some pieces returning that'll need to elevate the role, and Theo Pinson, Luke May, and others. And I think it's going to be an exciting season. It's a lot of kind of unknowns, but it's talented unknowns, and that's a good thing.
Is there one newcomer that you're more excited to see than another?
Well, I think Cameron Johnson, who doesn't necessarily fit into the freshman newcomer, but he's a newcomer to Carolina basketball. I think it will be fascinating to see how he assimilates into the Carolina program. I think he has done everything right off the court. I mean, he has just fit right in with the team. He has embraced the Carolina basketball kind of family aspect, the mentality of it. He has done all of that right. And so now the question is, how can he help them out on the floor? And if he is being asked to fill some of that role that Justin Jackson played so well last year, he'll need to expand his game. He is a terrific three-point shooter, and so is Justin Jackson. But Justin Jackson also could penetrate. He distributed the ball. He was an unbelievably good defender by the end of the year. In fact, I think his defense was a big reason why the Tar Heels won the national championship. And so can Cameron Johnson fill some of those other roles as well? Can he elevate his game in other ways in addition to what is obviously a high-quality three-point ability that he has? And then Jalik Felton is an incredibly talented young guy. And so I think the question is, can Jalik make sure that he harnesses that talent in a way that's going to be beneficial for the entire Tar Heel team? Can he fit into what they need him to do and still showcase his individual talents, which are at a very high level? In fact, Roy Williams said many times this spring on the Rams Cup tour that he thought Jalik Felton was more just pure talented than Raymond Felton. And that's a mouthful because Raymond Felton's really good. But then he threw in the caveat. He said, but you don't know about the heart, the toughness. You don't know about that stuff yet. And that's what took Raymond Felton to another level. And so I think you have to learn some of that about the freshmen. They're doing that right now as they go through preseason practices. And then, the rest of us will get to see it here coming up in about a month.
And do you think as Carolina fans, they should be nervous about this team because it seems like they're going to rely heavily on the three-point shooting for maybe one of the first times since Roy Williams has been back to Carolina. They don't really have anybody paint that can really rebound the ball or do things like that. So do you think fans should be nervous about that?
Well, I do think that Carolina has the highest likelihood of being successful by playing a little different way than Roy Williams likes to do so. And that's as of right now, Pat. I mean, that's kind of on paper. That's what it looks like. Now, you don't really know how it's all going to end up. But, on paper right now, certainly it shows you that Carolina is a perimeter-dominated team because the best, most experienced players are, for the most part, guards. It's Joel Berry, it's Theo Pinson, it's Cameron Johnson, who's proven that at the ACC level, even though it wasn't with Carolina. It's Kenny Williams, it's Jalik Felton, that really high talent player we just talked about. So, that's what it tells you right now. But you also don't know how things are going to play out as you move through what is a very long college basketball season. And so I think it will be fascinating to watch how Roy Williams manages this group. Does he want to play with his traditional lineup that he likes to have out there with two bigs, or does he go to a more perimeter-oriented attack? And I'm sure we'll see both of those things as the season moves along. But how does he ultimately come to the decision of the best way for this particular team to win? We were talking about that with the football team on the offensive side. And that's something I think Roy Williams has done a terrific job with his entire career is, get the guys that you have on this year's team and find the best way to make them play together at a high level. I think the best example at Carolina was in 2013, where by the end of the season, the Tar Heels were starting Marcus Page, Dexter Strickland, P.J. Hairston, Reggie Bullock, and James Michael McAdoo. That is not a traditional two big man lineup, but the Tar Heels moved to that way because it was the best way for them to win, and they did so at a pretty high level, particularly in the back half of that season. And so Roy Williams will have his guys ready, and he'll have the best combination of players out there, and he'll grow his players, and he'll get them playing the best at the end of the year.
And we know what we'll see from Joel Berry and Theo Pinson, but if you could just talk a little bit about what kind of role Luke May will play in the team this year, coming off that incredible shot against Kentucky. He's kind of taken his game to another level, and you see him once again win the mile competition, and he's been working in the weight room a lot this offseason. What do you think you'll see from him, and do you think Roy Williams will use him maybe in the 5 spot at some point in the season in that smaller lineup that you were talking about?
Yeah, I would think so, and I would think Luke is going to play a variety of roles for Carolina this year, and I think the most important thing for him is to just take that next step in every level of his game, because you saw, there were times last year where he had big-time games, the 17 rebounds or whatever it was against Florida State in the Smith Center, being the South Region MVP. And it wasn't just because he hit that shot. He was the South Region MVP because he had double-doubles in both games and against Butler and Kentucky. And then he didn't score in the Final Four. And so, it's got to be on a more consistent level. It's in there because you've seen it, and you've seen it against good teams. And so now for Luke May, it has to be, hey, he's got to have that kind of production 4 out of every 5 games or 5 out of every 7 games or whatever it is. It can't be 2 out of every 10 games that he has that kind of production. And so he will be asked to fill an elevated role. And as an older guy who continues to improve, you would think that he would be ready to take on some of that. And he'll have to rebound too. You mentioned Carolina's lack of experience in the post, and every other big guy for the most part is somebody that the Tar Heels haven't seen play in a Carolina uniform yet. Whether it's Garrison Brooks or whoever it is, Sterling Manley, Brandon Huffman, these guys we haven't seen it yet. And so we have seen Luke May. We know he can rebound, and he'll have to take that to a higher level and help those other young guys out too. So I think he'll play an enormous role on this particular team, as will Joel Berry, as will Theo Pinson, as will Kenny Williams, as will Seventh Woods. These guys who have been through it a little bit, it's time for them to help these rookies out.
And Kenny, you talk about Kenny Williams. He's coming off obviously a devastating injury, but coming back, do you think he'll be a guy that'll start right away, or do you think maybe he's better suited coming off the bench?
Terrific question, and one that I really have no answer to. I mean, I think you can probably feel pretty safe that Joel Berry is going to start, and that Theo Pinson is probably going to start, and Luke May is probably going to start. And then after that, I think there's a variety of ways that the Tar Heels go. Would it be Kenny Williams? Is it going to be Jalik Felton? Is it going to be Seventh Woods? Is it going to be Cameron Johnson? Is it going to be one of the freshman big men? Is it going to be 2 of the freshman big men? I mean, you just don't know. And so I think that's what the Tar Heels are figuring out in part right now, is that they're going through these month of preseason practices to figure some of this out. And I think also you're going to see a variety of lineups, and everybody's so obsessed about who starts, but I think you're going to see a variety of lineups throughout the games, particularly early in the season. Roy Williams has always kind of experimented with different lineups of guys on the floor together and maybe some unusual combinations to not only get guys used to playing with one another, but to see how that all meshes when that particular group is out there, so that he can continue as the head coach to get the information, to learn from how they play together, both for practice to try to get them to improve, and then for what he's most comfortable with as the games get more important and impactful later in the year. And so I think you're going to see a ton of different player combinations, particularly in these first couple of weeks, and eventually Roy Williams will figure out his best couple of combinations that he wants to go forward with.
And one more question for you here, Jones. We heard you and Adam talk a little bit about on the Carolina Insider, but what do you think the chances are we'll see Joel Berry maybe play a two-guard role and let Felton kind of run the point and run the offense a little bit as we get later on into the season?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Joe Barry played off the ball some this year. I think you've got, Jalik Felton can handle the ball. Seventh Woods can handle the ball, as we know. So, it would not surprise me to take Joe Barry off the ball some to allow his ability to shoot the three-point shot, which he did, before the injury in the NCAA tournament, where he really did struggle from the outside on a consistent basis, although, as we know, he hit some big ones, particularly in that championship game.
Yeah.
He was up around 42, 44% for the year. That's a pretty good clip. And so if you maybe just take a little step forward on that, then you're really at a high level as far as shooting the three. And so I think you'll see Joel Berry both on the ball, excuse me, Pat, and off the ball some this year for the Tar Heels. And the best part about that is he can handle that. He, as a senior, as a guy who's seen a bunch, been through a bunch, experienced a bunch, accomplished a bunch, he can handle these different roles and not have his level of play drop. He'll just understand what his particular role is at that time. And I just think Joel Berry is such a tough player, such a quality player. Man, he's one of my favorites to watch out there for the Tar Heels, and I expect him to have a huge year for Carolina.
Well, Carolina at home this weekend on the football side of things. They're taking on Virginia at 3:30. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Late Night with Roy gets underway this Friday as well. Jones, really appreciate the time talking a little Tar Heels. Thank you so much.
Oh, man, Pat, thanks so much for having me on. And again, appreciate you, your kind words about the podcast. Glad you are an avid listener, and really we look forward to doing that every single week. So looking forward to that, and looking forward hopefully to a big Tar Heel football win this week, and let's see if they can get it done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Again, a huge thanks to Jones Angell, really giving us a ton of time, and was about to be a very busy slate for Carolina with basketball about to get cranked up and football in the heart of conference play. So UNC, they'll face Virginia at home this Saturday, Kenan Stadium. Kick will be at 3:30, and you can listen to Jones Angell and the crew on the Tar Heel Sports Network starting at 2:30. Mentioned Late Night with Roy. That's going to start tonight. That means basketball season will be officially underway as the Tar Heels, as you may know, they're back on the court trying to defend their national championship, and it's going to be a tough one as the Tar Heels lost some key pieces, but they are returning some key pieces as well in Joel Berry, Luke May, and Theo Pinson. So it should be a fun season for the Tar Heels. Corey and I will be back with Panthers Talk this week to talk Panthers and Eagles in the Thursday night matchup, and then preview next week against Chicago. You may notice that we're on YouTube now, as we'll transition from SoundCloud over to YouTube, so please give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also follow Corey and I on Twitter. Leave us a comment on Facebook. Leave us a comment on YouTube if you guys want us to discuss anything on the podcast, or just give us some comments as well. We'll really appreciate it. So that's going to do it. Episode 8 of the Sports Lounge in the books. Until next time, go Tar Heels, and as always, keep pounding.